Welcome to the Write Academy. I'm Matthew R. Miller. Now, you may have had someone ask you, if you're a writer, are you a pantser or a plotter? Pantser, you think it's a rather personal question, but it doesn't mean anything bad. It means this. A plotter is someone who's going to write an outline, plan the book carefully before they start writing. A pantser means writing by the seat of your pants. In other words, you just start writing, see where it goes. Each one of these has advantages and disadvantages and applies to different kinds of people. I don't think one is better than the other. I don't think that one is right and the other wrong. I think they're just different. So let's start with the pantser. That's what I am. I'm a pantser. I start writing and just see where it goes. Now, I do have the book in my head. I have the characters in my head. The things that I might take advantage of by plotting out the book and doing outlines, I have that in my head basically, but not in the full detail. Okay, so pantsing is good for people who tend to have outbursts of creativity, people who are very artistic like me, who tend to be very emotional, who are, sensitive, who think a lot, a little bit introverted, because pantsing is basically creating, just blatant creating. Now, the advantages of pantsing. First, it allows outbursts of creativity without you being restricted by outlines or your plans, without having to go back and change those to fit what you're writing. Second, it kind of lets the characters lead the book. And this is kind of hard to understand because you're probably thinking, wait, the writer is making the characters. They're not making you. But when we write, I believe that part of our subconscious comes out in our writing, even if we don't mean it to. And so you'll have characters, and if you have to know your character very well if you're a pantser or a plotter, either way. If you don't know your character, nothing's going to work. But if you know your character deeply, you understand them, what makes them tick, what they're good at, what they're bad at, the good, the bad, that kind of stuff, what they look like, what they talk like. If you know them deeply, then that character, when you write, is going to react in certain ways that are consistent with that character's personality. Now, they're going to change over the course of the story, sure, but that character is a person. When you're a pantser, the characters can be in situations and you can kind of naturally let them react how they really would react, you see? So if a character is very, very timid and they're in a very scary situation, they're going to try to hide or they're going to try to run away. And that hiding might lead to another situation you hadn't thought about, might lead to another action, another plot point, another setting, another scene, another idea, you see. That's one advantage of pantsing, is the burst of creativity. Another advantage is that you are freer and more open to have your book, your story, go where you want it to go. It's basically just more open, right? It's kind of like going into a venture and having, let's just see where it takes us. And so this applies to the plot, to the theme, to things like this. Now, you should have these things in your mind. You shouldn't just start writing with no concept or clue of what you're writing about. Another advantage, in my opinion, of pantsing is that it allows you to write based on your emotions. Now, when I decide to write a story, here's how it works for me. Everyone's different. This is just my way, okay? I will become emotionally overwhelmed by the thought of a setting or a time or a story. I might watch a movie, I might have something happen in my life, I might read something, and that'll set me thinking. And I'll think, let me give you an example. When I listen to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, which is the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard, it makes me feel like I've lived past lives in other cultures. Now, I'm not saying I believe in past lives necessarily, that's just how it makes me feel. And so I start thinking, maybe I lived in ancient India. If I did, would I have been a Brahmin, a prince, or would I have been a worker? Would I have been a peasant? What would I have been? And that starts to create a story in my mind. And so if I feel strongly enough about it, I'll start writing about that story, you see? So it leaves you very open to allowing your emotions to drive you and allowing this open-ended creativity to create a story based on something you might feel or see in your head. I see scenes like movie. I see scenes in books as if I were watching a movie, is what I mean. So when I think of a scene, I imagine the character going there. I imagine what it might look like. I imagine what's happening like I'm watching a film. Everyone's different. That's just how I work, okay? I tend to be very emotional and creative, emotional and creativity based, if that makes sense. Okay. Now, there are some disadvantages of being a pantser. Number one, it can be too open-ended. So I've gotten to places in my books where I'm like, yeah, I wasn't planning for this to happen, and now this kind of contradicts what happened back in chapter 3. Now I have to go rewrite it. If you're a pantser, you're going to have a lot of rewriting and revision. Everyone should rewrite and revise, but pantsers especially, you're going to have a lot of this. You're going to place your characters in situations you may not know about, and then your plot might take off in another direction. You have to be careful because you might end up starting to write another genre, or start writing a plot that had no relation to the first part of the book. You got to stop and say, okay, what am I really writing here? I need to get back and focus. Also, if you're a pantser, you really have to know your characters, your setting, and your theme very, very, very well in your head. So the things you might gain by writing them down, you've got to hold all that in your head. And, human beings, we can't think of everything all at once, so you can tend to forget stuff. Okay. Let's talk about plotters. Plotters means you sit down, you write character sketches, you write outlines, you write the plot in advance. You already know what's going to happen in the story, how it's going to end. You already know everything about the setting and things like that. There's probably a better way. I probably should be doing that. But like I said, I don't think either way is right or wrong. I think it depends on the person. Now, if you're a plotter, there are some advantages. First, you're going to have far fewer situations where you don't know what's going on. You've got it in your mind. And so you can focus on writing the scene. You can focus on the art, the style of your writing, rather than focusing on that and what's going to happen next. Okay, so that's a real advantage. You can focus on the craft of structuring sentences and words almost solely because you know what's going to happen in the plot. Another advantage is that you will know your characters intimately because you've written it down. And if you ever forget, or you think, how would this character act in this situation? Go to your character sketch. It's right there for you. It gives you more control, much more control over your story. Like I said, when I write, my story goes in directions sometimes I never planned. But if you're a plotter, you will have more control over your story. And that can be a good thing, right? Because this is your story. And it helps you to focus and stay focused and stay on the path. And that's a really good thing. Another advantage is when you do have these outbursts of creativity, which all artists do from time to time, then you're going to be able to allow that burst of creativity to really drive what you're writing at the moment. You're not going to have to share that processor time, so to speak, with creativity, writing, crafting it, and thinking about what's happening next or wondering where the characters are going to go. You've got it. So when you get that outburst of creativity, you can pour it all into the scene, which can make for some really good writing. Okay. Now, some disadvantages of plotting. Perhaps the biggest disadvantage is just that. You already know what's going to happen. So if you have these flights of emotion or flights of fancy or transported to another world by some great song, or you see a movie and it inspires you and you think, I want to write something like that, you're kind of limited. You have to go back and change the outline, change the plot, which you can do, that's fine, but that's a lot of work. And so it can a little bit maybe inhibit creativity or inhibit that open-ended creativity and that inspiration that I personally enjoy. Okay, so there's advantages and disadvantages to each one, to plotting and pantsing. Now, I will say if you're a new writer, especially if you're trying to write your first book, be a plotter. It is absolutely recommended. Even if you're naturally a pantser, no. The first full novel I ever wrote, I thought it was so wonderful, and I didn't plot it out or outline it, and going back and looking at it is terrible. Oh my God, it's so bad. Like it's a joke. So it's that bad. I would never want anyone to read it, and I'm so glad it never got published. So if it's your first time writing a story, or if you're new, definitely plot it out. Take the time to plot it out. Do it. Once you get your groove, so to speak, once you kind of get a feel for who you are as a writer, your style, what kind of characters you use, kind of setting, then you can move into pantsing and see if it suits you. Maybe it won't. Maybe you'll say, no, I want to be a plotter forever. Great, that works. Someone like me, at this point in my writing career, I can't be a plotter. I just can't. It just doesn't work for me. It inhibits me. On the other hand, a plotter would probably say that I'm crazy because how can you write a book not knowing where it's going? So pantsing and plotting, pantser, plotter, which one are you naturally? I hope that helps. This is some thoughts I had today because I'm actually doing a video course on for new writers on how to write a book. I'm going to be posting and selling this course when it's finished. But for now, I was going through today character sketches, outlines, and I started thinking, man, maybe I should do this. And then I thought, well, maybe not, because I tend to not be that kind of person, a plotter. So yeah, I hope that helps you, a little suggestion, a little something to think about. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'm Matthew R. Miller. This is the Write Right Academy.